Okay, well, I'm in my element of teaching, right? So, given that I've been a professor here since 1990 at Utah State, I've also been a therapist at the family place since 1990. So I thank you. So I go way back. Anyways, but I'm young. I'm young, yes. So today they asked me to talk about depression and anxiety, which, so the first thing that I want to do today is I want to put a context on what depression and anxiety are so we understand it, and then I'm going to talk about it from a certain frame of reference today. So basically, I think one of the first things is that we need to understand for ourselves that depression and anxiety are two different conditions, but their symptoms, causes, and treatments overlap. And they commonly occur together, actually. When you feel depressed, you feel some anxiety as well. So it's really important that we understand that there is an overlapping in these two kinds of experiences that life brings us, right? In reference to depression and anxiety. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is what I refer to as unhealthy depression and anxiety, and healthy depression and anxiety, because what I can't do in 50 minutes is talk to you about unhealthy depression and how to deal with that. Because that's more long-term. And that requires that you seek out some therapy from trained therapists who can really help you and support you in that kind of situation. So the symptoms of major depression include depressed mood, lack of interest in enjoyable activities, increase or decrease in appetite. Now, we might experience these in healthy ways too when we're experiencing a tough situation in our lives. But I just want you to understand the difference between unhealthy and healthy. Insomnia or hypersomnia, slowing of movement, lack of energy, feelings of guilt or worthlessness, trouble concentrating, suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Now, here's what I mean by seeking therapy. A person needs to have experienced 5 or more of these symptoms for the last 2 weeks. If that continues over time, that's when you really need to seek some support and help, right? Because what happens is we exceed our capacity to cope when these symptoms continue. Now, in reference to anxiety disorder, now most of us experience anxiety in different situations in life in general, right? Over different kinds of things that happen to us. But an anxiety disorder includes excessive worry, restlessness, being easily fatigued, trouble concentrating, irritability, sleep disturbance, and muscle tension. Now you're going to experience some of those same kinds of things in just different situational or just ongoing kinds of experiences with depression and anxiety in everyday life. But here's what you have to understand. A person experiences these symptoms most days for more than 6 months, and they cause distress in your daily life. You need to seek out therapy. So in 50 minutes, I can't be your therapist. Unless you want to see me in my psychiatric booth for 5 cents. And here's what I'll say to you. Life is like a deck chair. And you know, what that means is people get on this cruise ship, and some people take their chairs and they place them on the front of the ship because they want to see where they've been in life, and others place theirs on the rear of the ship because they want to see where they're going in life. On the cruise ship of life, Janae, in which direction is your chair facing? And she says to me, I've never been able to get one unfolded, Diane. Now, she needs serious therapy in that kind of a situation. Okay, you get my point. So basically, what the message that I'm trying to send to you is this. Everyone may experience what we might call healthy depression or anxiety because we face situations, we face things in our life, and we're going to experience some of those symptoms, but we can still function normally. We find ways to cope. So what I'm here today to do with you in the time that I have is to help you to think about how your own coping skills and additional kinds of coping skills that you can think about in reference to the situations you face in life and the different kinds of experiences that you might have with depression and anxiety. That's my purpose here today as I talk to you. So I've given you all a packet, and basically I want to talk about coping and resiliency in reference to depression and anxiety. Now, coping, if we were to think about what does it mean to cope? Well, to deal with and attempt to overcome problems and difficulties. Now, we do that in different kinds of ways, by the way. We call that coping styles. Now, you want to think about your own coping style. One of those is what we call problem-focused coping. What that means is that I tend to take steps to try to solve my problem. I've learned how to solve problems, which means I can define my problem, I can think about it, or overthink about it. I like to do that. So we take, and then we try to figure out what are some ways that maybe I can address this problem. And so we think of alternative approaches. So we go through this whole problem-solving kind of a coping way. Now, the other one is what we call emotion-focused coping. Okay, that has different elements to it. Emotion-focused coping means that, that I try to get a cognitive perspective on what I'm dealing with, but I try to look at it in a more positive frame. Okay? Now, sometimes emotional focused coping can be unhealthy, like drugs and alcohol, or other types of things that might not be as healthy for us, right? So those are the two different types of coping. Now, most of us use both types of coping. Now, resiliency is the ability for you to overcome all types of challenges, trauma, tragedy, personal crisis, plain old life problems, and bounce back stronger, wiser, and more personally powerful. And I'm sure if you all think about it, you've had experiences where you really learned from that, and it empowered you in reference to how you go about your life. And so it's important that we understand those two concepts when it comes to depression and anxiety. Now, I'm just going to draw a little illustration up here. I mean, here's the thing, is when you're experiencing depression and anxiety, I'm just going to draw some spirals here. What tends to happen is, so I'm experiencing depression, or anxiety, and what tends to happen is the kinds of symptoms that I just explained to you, we experience these, and we get all wound up into this real tight spiral. Now, as you look at that visually, here's the thing that you have to understand. A lot of people say, well, how does changing my thoughts to a more positive way of coping really make a difference? But here's the thing. If you don't do something to get out of this really tight place that you're in, this negative spiral, this is real negative spiral, you have to do something to come out of it. It just doesn't go away. It has to be intentional based on your experience and coping skills that you've experienced, right? So if we draw another little spiral over here, so tell me, what are some of the things that you have found work for you to start to come out of the spiral? Some of you share. Yes?
Walking in the canyon.
Okay. I'm going to put a W for walking. Okay, good. Yes?
Working out in the yard, in the garden.
Okay, working out in the yard, garden. Okay. What else? Yes?
Focusing on what you do have, like gratitude.
Okay, so gratitude. Okay, what else?
I ride my dirt bike.
Okay, you ride your dirt bike. Okay.
I sing out loud.
Sing. Okay. Yeah, Jackie?
My kids.
Okay, you focus on your kids. Okay. Yeah, focusing on others always helps, right? We get kind of outside of ourselves. It's kind of like a service, kind of a concept that we often hear people talk about. What else? Yeah.
Just talking to somebody.
Just good. Support. Yeah, we all need support, don't we? How about, do you try, yeah.
Meditation.
Good. Meditation. Okay.
Sometimes I watch a movie that I'll know will make me cry, but in a good way. So
Okay, good.
it.
Like, because it's empowering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fishing.
Fishing. Okay.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Okay. We're almost out of the spiral. What else? Anyone try? Yeah. Reading. Anyone try to change their self-talk or how you're talking to yourself?
Positive self-talk.
Huh?
Positive self-talk.
Okay.
I think seeking help professionally sometimes.
Yes.
Talking to a doctor or therapist.
Was there another comment? Yeah.
I'll do art.
Art. Okay, so now, by intentionally doing some things, I can start to come out of this spiral. Sometimes I do need professional support or help to be able to come out of that spiral. But, I'm just trying to illustrate to you, you can't just not do anything, right, when you're experiencing these. And depending on the severity of your symptoms and the longevity of them is how you're going to proceed with that. Now, there is a mind-body connection. I think that it's always important that we understand, right? I mean, it's a biopsychosocial experience and spiritual. And so, keeping physically active, and a lot of you mentioned some pretty physically active things in coming out of that spiral that are really important for us to continue to do. Not that it's immediately going to take depression and anxiety away, but it starts to bring us out of the spiral. Sleeping well can make a difference in your overall well-being as well, right? And eating, all those kinds of things matter. But also emotional health is important for coping, right? So we have to focus on both. It's kind of that mind-body connection that happens. And we have to be aware of that. And so when I'm experiencing depression and anxiety, I need to be aware of the mind-body connection. And that matters. And it becomes important for us to have coping skills in both areas. Finding ways that are helpful to us in that context. Okay, so one of the first things I want to do, and this is in your packet, on coping and resiliency. I'm assuming everyone got one of these. I want to talk about protective factors. And I've just given you some handouts because I'm a big handout person because I want you to walk away and I want you to have something concrete that you can go back and look at and think about your own life in reference to what might be helpful to you. Because part of the reason you're here today is to be able to get an idea about how you can proceed successfully and in an empowering way in your life. And so even if you just take one thing that I talk about today and try to implement that into your life, what do you think that does for you? If you even take one thing and try to implement it, what does that do for people? Or for you personally? Anyone? Yeah. It empowers you. Yeah. I mean, it puts you on this direction that's, that's more positive for you. And so, we have to be really intentional about doing these kinds of things and make decisions and choices. So protective factors are something that we often talk about. And protective factors, it's really important that we recognize in our lives our own protective factors. Because protective factors are a part of resilience. This is a resiliency conference, so we're talking about and thinking about our own resilience and what helps me to bounce back, in different life circumstances. Like, for instance, what helped me bounce back from both my parents' deaths? Did I feel depressed? Sure. Did I feel some anxiety over different situations in my life? Sure. But how did I bounce back? What did I do? And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in terms of resiliency, but I just want to share one example with you. One of the things that's a protective factor or a resilience factor in my life is my sense of humor. Okay? And so my dad, when he was alive, he felt bad because he buried my mother down in the lower part of the cemetery, and he felt she was higher class, and he should have buried her in the upper part of the cemetery. I don't know what his thinking was around that, okay? So my mother died in 2007. My father died in 2015. But, he was always like, oh, she was high class, and I should have given her more high class things and all this, and I'm like, whatever. Okay, so anyway, so the day of his funeral, we're driving in the limousine into the cemetery. They don't go over to where my brother and my father are buried. They drive up to the upper part of the cemetery. And I'm like, what the heck? They had dug the hole up in the upper part of the cemetery. And I'm like, the look on my sister's face. So I got out and I said, and the look on the mortician's face, and I said, why are we going up there? My mom and dad are buried down there. And he looked horrified. And I said, dang him, he tried to get himself on the upper side. That's just wrong. And then my friend said, oh no, your mother said, don't bury that old man by me. one of my good friends. So anyways, all I'm saying is I tried to see a sense of humor in that particular situation as to not get too anxious about what was happening. So we just went with it. And then they went and dug a different hole. Anyways, okay? So I'm just saying, you can choose how to handle things in your life. Now, protective factors contribute to our mental health, and they allow us to be resilient when we face challenges. And so it's really important that we understand our own protective factors. Let me just review these quickly, and you can go back to these. And you might want to think about, as I talk about each of these, rating where you think you're at. Where do you think you're at in these protective factors? And what can you do to intentionally strengthen that protective factor in your own life? Now, the first one is social support. Now, someone mentioned that in coming out of the spiral, right? We want to talk to others. And so, basically, we need to have the ability to talk out our problems, either with a therapist or with a good friend. Someone that helps us to be able to think more clearly about what's happening to us. It's kind of like we always ask for practical help, like, if our car breaks down, we get someone to help us. But we can do that with emotional things too. And anytime we can be in connection with another person, that's important to our well-being, isn't it? Now here, I just have one word of advice though, okay? This is my counsel from Dr. Di. When you have a difficulty and a challenge and you're feeling depressed and anxious, don't talk to 10 different people. Because what happens is everyone has their own opinion, and then you get even more overwhelmed and more anxious and more depressed. Okay? So what I would say is think about your particular challenge at the time and who would be the most helpful to me in that particular moment. That just becomes crucial to you, because otherwise it will do the reverse effect. And I've seen that happen many, many times. So think about support. Coping skills, just what are some of your own coping skills in reference to how you regulate your emotions, different things that you do. What about your physical health? Are there things you need to change about that? Exercise, diet, sleep? Now, what does that look like? And, and what am I going to do with that piece? Where am I at in terms of my protective factors around that particular thing? A sense of purpose. Do I have a sense of purpose? Believe it or not, when it comes to depression and anxiety, when you lose your sense of purpose in yourself, that has a huge impact on your emotional health. And so finding that, discovering that is really important to the therapeutic process of depression and anxiety, as well as just in your own personal life, that you think about what that is, and that changes, right? I mean, I've always said my philosophy is change is the only constancy that exists in life. And so, you are going to experience change in your identity and in different ways that you have to redefine what that looks like. Like, heck, I mean, here I am, I'm 65, I'm kind of on the downhill slope of my career. Now, when I was much younger and I was working on all my degrees and doing all these things, my sense of purpose was different. And now, at this developmental stage, right, because we all go through these developmental stages, I mean, I have to think about what does that look like now for me as I move in kind of a different direction in my life, and what is my sense of purpose? Wouldn't you all agree that when you don't have a good sense of purpose, it really contributes to your depression and anxiety in a big way? And that's why as people move towards retirement, if they don't get a handle on that, they can experience, a lot of depression and anxiety over that huge change. Because here's the thing, we face big transitions sometimes in our lives that will contribute to depression and anxiety. And we have to be prepared for those. Some transitions, I look at transitions in two ways, okay? Transitions that we're prepared for, that we know are coming, that we can actually be very proactive about, and transitions that are unanticipated. Those are the ones that are a little tougher, right, in reference to depression and anxiety when we experience those kinds of transitions. So just be aware of that sense of purpose. Self-esteem. Where's your self-esteem on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being that you feel really good. Now here's the thing I want you to understand about self-esteem. Self-esteem, it's your overall sense of yourself, but it's also, sometimes we have more positive self-esteem in some aspects of our lives. Like work. Maybe you have a really, positive regard for yourself in reference to work. But maybe when it comes to intimate relationships, maybe you don't feel quite as positive. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to be able to focus on different aspects of your life and how positive am I? What's my degree of positivity towards myself in those various areas? Because oftentimes we lump them all together. And what you have to do is really look at the different aspects of your life in reference to that self-esteem. And then healthy thinking, right? Like what's that cycle of thinking? We all, unfortunately, have gotten these negative tapes that run in our heads sometimes, right? From our experiences. So you have these negative tapes and they're running. Sometimes we don't recognize they're running, but they really impact our depression and anxiety. You know, and I mean, it just contributes to feeling more down and anxious and all the things that I talked about earlier in terms of some of those kinds of symptoms. So you have to be aware of how you go about being able to get in touch with your self-talk, and how do you change that? How do you become more affirming? You know, what do you do with that? Now, we really don't have time, but I just included a little worksheet for you in here. Because here's the thing. If you walk away from this conference and you just say, oh, that was a great conference. Boy, I really liked this one session I went to, and then we just go about our lives. And we really don't think about it anymore. We really don't try to take some action in terms of our personal lives. So what I would recommend for you is that you go back and you do this worksheet. You look at, hey, what's a protective factor that has been valuable to me in my life in dealing with depression and anxiety? And, you know, and being able to walk yourself through this worksheet and being able to think about specific actions and steps that you can take to become more resilient in your own life. Okay, so I think that's important. When we have a lot of protective factors, it equips us to deal more effectively with the depression and anxiety that comes to us as we go through our life in different situations. And so, but here's the thing. You have to be aware of what those are in order to tap into them, so you don't stay in the negative spiral. You have to be able to tap into what works for me and what are my own personal protective factors that make a difference in my life. And how do I take those and utilize them in day-to-day life? Now, I want to talk about building happiness. You know, everyone has what we call a happiness set point that continually can be expanded. And so we ought to think about, what is my happiness set point? You know, how do I go about experiencing happiness? You know, again, happiness just doesn't happen because we exist. It happens because we create some of that. We expand that. We do something with it. And so this particular handout just talks about the fact that what expands you makes you happier. It's the law of expansion. And think, you know, paying attention to what that is. You know, we all kind of have this inner GPS. And no matter where you go, it guides you where you want to go. And so we all have this. And when we expand it in a certain direction, it's going to take us in a certain way, down a certain path, because that's what we choose, you know. And we get guided in our thinking about that. So here's what that looks like. Contraction, if we're being constricted in our lives, right, then we feel more unhappiness, fear. Hey, there's a good book out there. I'm just going to tell you this, and it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. And it's by Susan Jeffers. She actually was a PhD psychologist, and she passed away of cancer. But I would encourage you to get that book and read it. Just look up Susan Jeffers. You can get her newsletter. Her family, I think, still sends it out. And the book is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. An awesome book that helps you to think about, how do I expand myself? You know, what do I do so I don't constrict myself so much and stay tightly wound up here? And if we want to expand ourselves, we have to do something that brings us more happiness, love, optimism, right? Feeling good. I remember one morning, I used to be a member of Curves. Now I go to Planet Fitness because Curves went away. But I remember one morning I was there. This is kind of a real like simple kind of a analogy. Oh, I was so tired, and I was like, you know, like barely stepping up on the little steps. You know, and then I was like, oh, this is so hard. All of a sudden I caught my thought process. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be my whole experience all morning if I don't change that. So I expanded it, and I said, no, I can do this. You know, and so I changed my whole set of how I was thinking, and then I started stepping up faster and moving those things faster. But you know, if I would have stayed in the low energy, saying all that negative self-talk and being resistive to that, I might as well have just stayed in bed, is what I'm suggesting. Now, that's a real simple analogy. Life doesn't happen that simple. But all I'm saying to you is I could choose to stay restricted here, or I could choose to expand myself, right, and come out. That's the law of happiness that you need to think about and how you do that. Now, just flip the page. Here are some general ideas about happiness set points. These are ways of thinking that I think make a difference in terms of how we go about our lives. One is, the universe is out to support you. From what lens, what is your worldview? How do you view the world? If you view the world as that everyone's out to get you, it's going to contribute to your depression and anxiety. But if you view the universe as the fact that, that there are things out there for me to help me, I just need to find them. There's a big difference between saying the universe is out to get me. That's like Darth Vader. The universe is out to get you. No, may the force be with you. No, listen to Luke Skywalker. Okay. This is my sense of humor, all right? Or be like Harry Potter. You know, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, right? Expecto Patronum! All of us need a wand when those dementors are coming, right? This is just one of my analogies. I have many wands. And when, expecto patronum, right? And it's going to chase the dementors away. Well, you got to do more than that, but I'm just saying. Okay, now, what you appreciate, you appreciate. In other words, likes attract likes. Whatever you think, feel, say, and act on, you draw yourself like a magnet, right? You can become happy for no reason at all, right? Like Desiree, she has a lot of posts of her cat, cats, and all I'm saying, that's kind of a positive thing, right? It's kind of like the concept of, I don't have to be happy for any reason at all. I can be happy because I have cats. Or whatever that is, right? Now, so there's kind of a secret formula that I just want you to think about in reference to your happiness. Because happiness is kind of now, not that we won't experience depression and anxiety, but happiness, I think overall, is something that we're all seeking for. You can call it whatever you want. Happiness, satisfaction, whatever you want to call that. But here's the thing. You need to be intentional. I cannot reinforce this enough on you. You have to be intentional. You have to be clear about what you want and what you desire to happen. And if your depression and anxiety is such that you are in a place in your life that you cannot figure that on your own, then you need to be in some therapy. Because that's why you seek that out, so someone can help you to be intentional about your life. And that's okay. I mean, do you know what I mean? I love working with people and empowering them to find themselves and really walk a life that they want to walk. Not that you won't experience some depression and anxiety, but there's things we have to do. So, attention. What you put your attention on grows stronger in your life. Put your attention on happiness by developing some happiness practices, right? Like, think about what makes me satisfied, what makes me happy. A lot of times I think, now I'm not saying you, I'm just saying sometimes people go about their life saying, how come I'm not happy? Well, if you don't have any habits, that develop that. I mean, it's like exercise, right? That's a habit. I go to Planet Fitness 3 days a week. It's a habit. I get up at 4:30 every morning. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I get up at 4:30. That's a habit. It contributes to my well-being. And if I didn't, and part of the reason I do that is because I am not going to be an 80-year-old wondering if I can walk out of my house. And that's intentional. Okay? That's intentional for me, and I put attention on that, and I develop habits that are going to help me both physically and mentally and emotionally to be the best that I can be. Not that I won't experience some depression and anxiety, but this is what I want to do. And then finally, being able to deal with your tension. We teach this all the time, right? Meditation, yoga, all these kinds of things, because if your body is tense all the time and you don't find ways to relax and you're wound up in this negative spiral, that is unhelpful to you in reference to being able to cope and be resilient in that. So that's kind of a little formula that I want you to think about. And then I just have a little handout on the next page on how do we build happiness. Well, there's all different kinds of ways, and you probably have some of your own, but I want you to think about a habit that when you walk away from today that you're going to develop, that becomes a part of your habit for being more happy. That can be gratitude things, like a gratitude journal. Maybe some of you already do that. Acts of kindness, like someone bought my Diet Coke at Maverick this morning behind me, kind of a pay it forward. So I do that too. Exercise, meditation, positive journaling, and fostering relationships. Connections in those support systems are just crucial to us, right? So we always want to think about, those kinds of things in reference to happiness. Okay, now, you hear about mindfulness probably more than you want to, I don't know, but I'm still going to talk about it. Why? Because if you look at mindfulness, it is one of the more challenging coping skills to be able to deal with. Yeah, I do like my little thing. I always purposely put these little things up there, like mindful or mindful, right? Which are you? Hey, did you like my little thing on the front of this? Yeah. The secret of happiness is to have a bad memory. Okay. Anyways, part of my sense of humor. Okay. Mindfulness is important because it's something that we have to practice daily. Yeah, being more mindful. And, because oftentimes, if you look at this handout, and I'm just going to draw a little diagram of what this looks like. But I wanted you to have the handout so you can remember it, okay? So, okay, we all have these, right? We all have emotions, and then we have our more reasonable kind of a mind. This is our emotions or our emotional mind, right? Now, most of the times when we run into depression and anxiety and we're upset and we're not feeling well, I mean, our emotions are all over the place, right? So generally, we're right there in our emotional mind. Now, that's okay, because here's the deal. Emotions are just emotions, and we all have them. And so the idea behind mindfulness is that you have to be non-judgmental You have to be non-judgmental, and you have to focus in the present moment. And what I mean by that is I have to be aware of what is the emotion I'm feeling. And not judge it. It's just an emotion. See, here's what we do. If I feel angry about something, then I feel guilty that I'm angry. Right? I have all these secondary emotions. So I stay in the negative spiral. Why? Because, number one, I'm not in tune with my emotions, and then, you know, and I'm judgmental about how I'm feeling, and I'm not aware of them in the present moment. Once you're able to do these two things, then you can connect the two so you can think more reasonably, and once that happens, you can use your wise mind. Like, for instance, I'm just going to share a simple example. So my husband, he was a doctor, a surgeon. He's very intellectual. He is one of the smartest people that I know, and my niece and everyone says it all the time. He's really smart. And because he's so smart, anytime you tell him something, he questions you. That drives me insane. But I've learned to be more mindful about the fact that that's just who he is. So when all of a sudden I'm like starting to get irritated, I recognize my emotion about that. I'm non-judgmental about it. And then I use my wise mind and I keep my mouth shut. Okay? Or sometimes I'll just answer his question without getting into all the irritation, do you know what I mean? Or just listen to what he has to say, right? Now, I know that's a simple example, but what I'm saying to you is if you don't do those kinds of things, that can get in your way. So being mindful, that's one of the things you need to start to think about. Actually, I just want to tell you, I practice mindfulness all the time, and I find that I get better at it the more that I practice it. I'm just more mindful, and my emotions do not get in my way as much. And as we know, emotions are a huge part of depression and anxiety. But if we can be more mindful about those, it's one of the things that we can do to strengthen our resiliency, our protective factors. Okay, so you can see I just have a little handout on what mindfulness is and some of the things you can do in reference to becoming more mindful, like mindfulness meditation, mindfulness walk, using your senses, just some things around that. Now, I've included just a resiliency quiz. Now, if you've had me as a student, you've probably taken this, but I would encourage you to do it again. And if you've never done it, you need to take this because it helps you to start to get in touch with your own resiliency and basically, you know, what you can do to be resilient every day in your life. What are my resilient characteristics? And this helps you to think about them. And on the third page it lists them, but so you'll take this little thing, it'll help you to get more in touch and be more aware of what these are. You know, all of us can be resilient every day. And each of us has access to this, right? Like you know, if you lose your keys, you're resilient, you find them. If you lose your phone, you're going to find it. At least I am. No matter what it takes, right? Yeah, I'm going to be resilient. I'm going to work through that adversity. Well, the same thing applies to the bigger things in life that depress you and bring you anxiety. Focus is really the key here. You need to focus on what is most helpful to you. And when we focus, if we can focus on the difficulty and the pain and the problems, or we can use strategies that then help us to bounce back, maneuver through, use our GPS, move through it. Now, even though I'm talking about this, it's not simple. I recognize that. I'm not here to tell you that you're not going to experience depression and anxiety, but what I'm here to tell you is that if you stay here, then your life, if you stay in this negative spiral and you don't do something proactively to come out of it in a resilient kind of a way, not that you won't come back to this, right? It's kind of like, I like to view things just kind of in summary. There's a negative circle and there's a positive circle in our lives. And I get to choose. Now, am I in the negative circle sometimes? Sure. But if I think about what helps me to move from the negative circle to the positive circle, I have the power and resiliency within myself to do that, to move myself over. But only I can do that. Only I can think about what is it that matters most to me in terms of my attitude about how I'm going to do that and focusing on how I'm going to do that. And those are some of the key things that we need to do, you know, in order to be more resilient and to be able to manage more effectively depression or anxiety that we might experience then in our lives. So, anyways, I hope and I encourage all of you, just take one thing. Use this packet to think about your own life and how you're going to master that better. And if for some reason you need help with that, then seek out therapy. At the family place, you know, we have therapists there that can help you with trauma you've experienced. We have all different formats of how you can pay or whatever that you know is. And so I encourage you to seek out help because that's why we exist. And that's why we're here. So thank you for your time and attention. Thanks.